You really have to hear what this team encountered. If you stay with me, you will understand why 3 people were buried after 1 week in August of 2011, and why 2 later deaths were tied to the same woods by a stopped heart and a name nobody wanted written down. On August 17, 2011, in Freetown-Fall River State Forest in southeastern Massachusetts, our field crew entered the interior trails west of Profile Rock and south of Bell Rock Road. By sunrise on the 3rd morning, 3 of the 5 people on that crew were dead. The first body showed no tearing, no broken bone, no water in the lungs, no poison, and a core temperature so low the medical examiner told us it did not fit the weather or the hour of death. The Commonwealth filed it under exposure, disorientation, and cardiac collapse. That report was wrong. What comes next is the account. My name is Samuel Weeden. I am 58 years old. In 2011, I was a cultural preservation officer, and I had been doing field documentation, oral history work, and site consultation for 23 years. My mother's people are Wampanoag. My grandmother would not let us point at the water when dusk came down over the low ground. I grew up hearing that some places do not need fences because the land itself keeps count. Nothing had ever frightened me. That changed at Freetown-Fall River State Forest. I knew the place in both the public way and the older way. Publicly, it was trails, gravel roads, ledges, picnic grounds, and long sections of reserve threaded through more than 5,000 acres. Older than that, it was stone, wet soil, cedar shade, and reservation land folded inside state lines. Since that week, I have not entered that forest without tobacco in my left coat pocket. I do not answer when someone calls my name from tree cover unless I can see their face. Our crew had 5 people. Aaron Vale was 46, a state forest ranger with 19 years of service, exact in her habits and the authority in the woods. Dr. Lena Mercer was 39, an archaeologist with 12 years in field recovery and survey, careful with language and patient with everyone else. Thomas Reed, who told everyone to call him Tommy, was 27. An audio documentarian with 2 years of experience on environmental jobs. Restless. Isaac Martin was 34, an environmental technician with 9 years in wetlands and water sampling, steady, and so kind that he checked other people's batteries before checking his own. The assignment looked ordinary. We were documenting informal cultural sites, runoff changes, and human impact in the interior sections running toward Mother's Brook and Doctor's Mill Pond. Reports had mentioned vandalism, off-trail fires, and objects left near a granite shelf beyond one of the lesser-used connectors. We were supposed to log what belonged in a report and walk out before dark. Then one tagged site produced old worked stone, ash below the topsoil, and a line of shell beads that should not have been there unless the ground had been opened before. That bought us a second day and a night camp on a service clearing because the light went early behind the trees and Aaron did not want us moving gear in the dark. Our camp Saturday, June 8 miles from the headquarters on Slab Bridge Road and over 8 miles from the nearest ambulance route by Aaron's unit. Granite shelves stood above black mud. Water collected in shallow beds under laurel and red maple. A person could be 20 yards away and seem beside you. That mattered later. The thing used the place the way a person uses a hallway in his own home. The first sign was subtraction. That afternoon the insects cut off all at once. Frogs stopped at the same moment. Even the leaf noise seemed to fold in on itself. Tommy looked up from a recorder check and said the woods had gone bad. Aaron told him not to talk like that. 5 minutes later the sound came back in layers, one species at a time. At 4:12 p.m. Lena found a pair of work boots placed side by side on a granite lip above a wet hollow. They were clean. The laces were tied. The toes pointed toward the trees. Inside one boot was a dry oak leaf folded in half. Aaron wrote it down as abandoned property, but nobody believed that. 30 yards beyond the boots, Isaac found prints in soft mud. They were human in shape at first glance, longer than my hand, deep at the front as if the weight fell forward. We followed 6 clear impressions out of the wet ground toward fern and stone. The 7th step never landed. There was no slide, no pivot, no heel turn, no jump mark, no broken branch. The track line stopped mid-stride in open space. Tommy crouched over the last print with his recorder running and said it looked like the person had been lifted. No one answered him. Once that detail entered the day, every ordinary thing around it started to look staged. At dusk we found the tagged site again. Someone had added to it since morning. 3 stones were set in a crescent around stripped moss. In the center sat a little bundle tied in faded red cloth. My grandmother had taught me what not to touch. Erin asked what it was. I told her it was either a warning or an offering, and that it had not been left for us. Isaac asked if we should move camp. Erin looked at the light under the trees and said no. Night 1 began with the same silence. It came at 9:17 p.m. so cleanly that the ring in my ears felt loud. Isaac was heating water. Lena was backing up photographs. Tommy had taken his recorder to the edge of the clearing to catch ambient sound. Erin called for him once. No answer. She called again. Then Tommy answered from our left, deeper in the trees than he could have walked in that little time. We found his recorder first. It was upright against a stump as if set there for us to notice. The battery door hung open. The file ended on 34 seconds of silence. Then one scrape, then Tommy's voice saying, "I am right here," in a tone so flat it made Lena stop walking. Erin told us to stay tight and keep our lights low. We moved 10 yards farther and found Tommy's shirt folded over a branch at shoulder height. His glasses were on top of it. His boots were below, side by side, clean as the first pair. Tommy himself was gone. Erin started a grid search against every instinct I had. She was the ranger. It was her call. We ran lines through the dark with lights, whistles, and our own voices. Twice the forest answered us with Tommy's voice. Once from ahead, once from behind. The second time, Isaac turned toward it before I caught his sleeve. Then something crossed between 2 trees 40 feet off. Not a body exactly. More like a section of darkness moving at the wrong speed while the trunks behind it lost shape for 1 second and returned. We found Tommy at dawn in a wet run of sedge beyond the granite shelf. He was lying on his side as if he had lowered himself for a rest. No cuts, no broken bones, no mud in his mouth. The strange part was his face. Not damage, absence. When the examiner later opened him, there was no infarct, no embolism, no bleed, and no reason the heart should have stopped when it did. The official language for Tommy Reed became probable exposure with terminal cardiac event. He had been missing less than 8 hours in August. His clothes were dry. His feet were clean. The report was wrong from its first sentence. Erin radioed for extraction. The radio answered with static. Her spare unit did the same. Lena's GPS kept redrawing the same 500-yard loop around camp even when she stood still. We packed anyway. Isaac carried Tommy's recorder. I carried the red cloth bundle because leaving it behind felt like speaking over someone older than me. Day 2 had the look of a place that had decided on us. Birds stayed out of the clearing. Deer signs stopped near the wet hollow. By afternoon we heard steps pacing our movement from tree cover, never rushing, never breaking branch. Erin set a rule that nobody walked alone, not even for 10 yards. Isaac counted our flashlight batteries out loud. 8 full, 3 partial, 1 lantern, 2 flares. Once a group starts counting supplies, the woods have already changed shape around them. At 7:40 p.m. we reached the old service road that should have taken us west. It took us back to the granite shelf instead. Lena stared at the same 3 stones and said she had marked the underside of one with chalk. The mark was there. We had been turned around without feeling the turn. Erin stood still for 10 seconds, then said we were bedding down one more night and leaving at first light with trail tape on every 100 feet. Night 2 broke us. The silence came earlier. Isaac had just tied orange tape to a sapling when we heard a woman calling from the dark beyond the road. Not close, maybe 60 yards. One call, then another. Erin said it could be a lost hiker. I said no. The voice used her name on the 3rd call. Nobody had spoken Erin's full name that day. The voice did. She took 6 steps before Isaac and I moved with her. The call shifted to our right without crossing the ground between. Erin raised her light. I saw a vertical shape by a cedar trunk, taller than any of us, narrow at the waist, the top half broken by branches so that my eyes could not hold a single outline. Two pale reflections hung where no eyes should have been level with mine. Then the shape leaned sideways without stepping and was gone. Aaron told us to fall back. The next sound came from camp. Metal striking stone. Lena shouted Isaac's name. That was the distraction. By the time we ran back, our lantern was smashed and one battery case was gone. We heard Aaron's whistle once behind us, then not again. We found her pack split open on the road and her field notebook laid flat in the center of it. Dry despite the wet ground, one page turned neatly to the date. 50 yards farther on, at the edge of a brook cut, the mud held her boot prints. Then one deep impression from both feet together as if she had landed hard, and nothing after. No drag, no run, no body. We stayed in the clearing till dawn because Isaac said movement was what it wanted, and for the first time Aaron was not there to argue. He held a flare in one hand and Tommy's recorder in the other. Around midnight, the recorder switched on by itself. A man's voice came through static. Old, cracked, speaking Wampanoag. Only a few words. Enough for me to hear the warning. Keep your eyes down. Do not answer. Feed the stone, not the dark. At first light, we found Aaron in 6 inches of water under alder roots, upright on her knees as if set there. No water in the lungs. No marks on the throat. Her watch had stopped at 11:14. The same hour the forest had gone silent. I knew then what my grandmother had left unnamed. Not an animal. Not a person gone wrong in the trees. An old taker tied to stone and low water. One that drew the last breath first and left the body almost untouched. The old people had a word for it. I had heard it once as a child and spent 40 years refusing to say it aloud. We opened the red cloth bundle. Inside was a pinch of tobacco, a small shell disc, and a folded note in blue ink. The handwriting belonged to Ruth Gray Cloud, an elder I had interviewed 3 summers before. The note said, "If the woods empty out around you, do not call back when it borrows a voice. Put tobacco on the old stone. Kneel. Tell it whose kin you are. Do not look up when it comes close." We followed that rule on the 3rd night because there was nothing else left. Lena and I knelt by the granite shelf. Isaac stood watch at the road because he would not let either of us stand alone. The silence came at 10:03 p.m. Then Tommy's voice called from the brook. Then Aaron's whistle sounded once to our left. Isaac turned his head. That was all it needed. His light swung across the trees, and for 1 second I saw more of it than I had before. A height well over 7 feet, shoulders that seemed to break apart into the trunks behind them, and limbs that moved with a jointing I could not settle into human or animal. Crossed wet ground without sound. It reached Isaac before the flare in his hand finished falling. Lena made a sound I still hear in sink pipes and heating vents. I did not look up again. I put the tobacco on the stone. I gave my family line in a whisper. I kept my eyes on the granite and counted my breaths. Isaac called my name once. Then he stopped. When dawn came, Lena and I were still kneeling. Isaac's flare had burned a white scar in the mud. His jacket hung from a low branch, zipped, empty. His boots were below it, placed heel to heel. 50 yards away, we found him lying beside the brook as if asleep after a hard shift. No wounds, no water in the lungs. The same emptied face. The same stopped heart with no medical path toward it. He had been the best of us, and it took him last. Search teams reached us by late morning. We walked out. The state report named disorientation, exposure, pre-existing cardiac factors, and one accidental drowning that never happened because there was no water where the body was found and no water in Aaron's lungs. The examiner admitted in a closed room that he could not explain the tissue findings. He said it was as if electrical activity had been taken away instead of failing. I began digging after the funerals. In a forestry memo from 1974, an employee named Harold Garrett described a stretch of trail near the same ledges where all insect noise stopped before a coworker was found dead without trauma. In a handwritten search note from 1988, a volunteer mentioned boots left in pairs on stone. In a fire report from 2001, one line had been crossed out but could still be read under the ink. Subject heard familiar voice calling from unoccupied tree line. The pattern was there if you laid the papers side by side. Silence. Voice. clothing arranged. Heart stopped. No clear cause. Ruth Gray Cloud agreed to see me that winter. She gave the thing its old name, Mashupawet, which she translated for me as the shadow that keeps the last breath. She said the people had known it far longer than the state had owned the forest, and that the granite shelf by the wet hollow was an asking place. It chose. It did not feed at random. It took those who answered, those who stared, and those who crossed the stone without respect. She told me I had lived because I had lowered my eyes and named my kin to the land before it finished choosing. Lena lived 6 more years. She never went back. She slept with a lamp on and a dish of tobacco by her apartment door. In March of 2018, she sat down at her kitchen table with a glass of water and died before the ice had melted. No blockage, no stroke, no poison. The examiner wrote cardiac failure of undetermined origin. Dr. Paul Niskanen, the medical examiner who handled Tommy and Isaac, died in 2020 in his office chair between one phone call and the next. Same language, same empty room. Freetown-Fall River State Forest is still open to the public today. Families still walk the trails. Kids still climb near Profile Rock. People fish, ride, picnic, and go home with mud on their shoes and nothing else to say. Most visitors will have an ordinary day there. But there are nights when low water sits black beside the granite, when the insects cut out all at once, when a voice uses the name you have not spoken aloud, and when the distance between the marked trail and the old places becomes smaller than a step. On those nights, the cases do not connect for police, for newspapers, or for the state. One report says exposure. Another says cardiac failure. Another says missing. The pattern stays hidden because each file is written alone. If you go there, and you hear someone call from the trees after the woods have gone silent, you keep your eyes down. You do not answer. You do not follow the voice, even if it belongs to the person you trust most. I survived because it let me. I survived because I obeyed the old rule and kept my eyes on the stone while it decided not to take the rest of me. That is the part that keeps me awake at night.